Everybody should be looking at a large screen that says Ki-Aikido, the inner practices. And hopefully that's what you're seeing. Good. I think we did this right. And that is indeed what we'll be talking about today. We tend to focus on technique a lot, but Tohei Sensei left us with a number of other very important practices which are part of our training and our system. So we'll be talking about those in more detail today. And let's switch panels here. Here we go. So I was curious as to just how far back some of these ideas go. How long ago were people meditating? And there is some controversy over this, like biblical scholars, depends on who you ask. But we're pretty certain that people were sitting in meditation, doing the beginnings of some of the practices we'll be talking about today, possibly as far back as 7,000 years ago. They say 3,500 to 5,000 years before the Christian era. And some of the evidence of this came from the Indus River Valley, which is that northwest India, Pakistan area, which was a rich civilization back then. And so they found some evidence of it in the form of these kinds of things that they dug up. And also this, which some scholars say is a person meditating. And some of the symbolism apparently equates to some of the early practices that evolved into yoga and some of the other South Asian religions. So what we do today, know that as we sit in meditation later today and do some of these practices, that this has been going on for a very long time indeed. So Aikido, as most of you know, is translated as the way of harmony or the way to union with Ki. And one of Tohei Sensei's major teachers, of the three teachers, is, of course, O-Sensei. And he says, you are here to realize your inner divinity and to manifest your innate enlightenment. And Tohei Sensei went on to say, along those same lines, to unify mind and body and become one with the universe is the ultimate purpose of our study. Most of you have heard that before. But it's important to keep reminding ourselves it's not about doing a great kokinagi. Although, ultimately, when you unify mind and body and use some of these principles, it does help you with your kokinagi. So we can't have the discussion about the tie-in to these ancient South Asian ideas without bringing in Tempu Nakamura Sensei. And Tempu Nakamura was one of the three major influences on Koichi Tohei Sensei. And he turns out to be a very interesting fellow. And as a result of doing the research to do this program, I ended up reading a lot more about him. And if you're interested, and I highly recommend checking it out, there's a lot of stuff on the web about him. But he fought for Japan in the wars against China and Russia. And I think in Will Reed's book, he describes him as being something between a Green Beret and a spy. So he was a heavy-duty warrior. And at a certain point, he contracted tuberculosis. And so he began to travel to try to find a cure, and he ended up at Columbia University, of all places, where he obtained a medical degree. And they actually declared him free of tuberculosis there, which ended up not being true. So he continued his journeys. I think next, if I recall, he went to Egypt. And he didn't get any results there in terms of a cure, but he heard about a yogi in the Himalayas, ended up going to the Himalayas and studying there for 2.5 years. And he was also cured of his TB while doing those practices. So he learned a whole lot about yoga and yoga philosophy. It's important to note that when you talk about yoga, that the exercises and stretches and all the things that we think of it in the West is actually a small part of the yoga tradition. That yoga originally was about meditation, about spiritual growth. And it's only in the West where it sort of became an exercise modality. So here's the interesting part. He formed this school, Nakamura Sensei formed this school called the Tempu Kai, which was attended by none other than Tohei Sensei, our founder of Ki-Aikido. And what he was teaching, what Nakamura Sensei was teaching, was that the mind and body were inseparable and that the mind leads the body. As a result of these ideas, Tohei Sensei began to incorporate principles of mind and body incorporation mind and body unification into how he approached and taught Aikido. So if this sounds familiar, this is where it came from. This is where the idea came from. When we talk about yoga, the word yoga comes from the root word yuj, which means to yoke or bind together. It's the way they used to bind oxen together to plow fields. It comes from that word. It implies the binding together of the mind, body, and spirit, or to unite the human spirit with the divine, which sounds a lot like Tohei Sensei's quote earlier. And the Bhagavad Gita, one of the most famous documents in the South Asian traditions, it's common to a number of them, says that yoga is the journey of the self, through the self, to the self. And in the more modern times, there's a teacher from New York who was a co-founder of a system called Jivamukti Yoga, which is a pretty physical style of Hatha yoga, physical yoga, but also very philosophical. She says you cannot do yoga. Yoga is, in fact, your natural state. What you can do are yoga exercises, which may reveal to you where you are resisting your natural state. So someone you may also have heard of, and that is the Buddha, says to keep the body in good health is a duty. Otherwise, we shall not be able to keep our mind strong and clear. So he recognized, this was in part of his revelation of the middle way, when he discovered that maybe starving himself wasn't such a great idea if he wanted to grow spiritually. So he recognized that it was important for us to have a strong body as well. And that's kind of how yoga evolved. Yoga and Buddhism grew up side by side and kind of cross-pollinated through the ages, and actually that continues to happen even now. So I brought in the subject of Ayurveda, which is kind of the yoga health system. And what's interesting about it is that the more that Western medicine and science studies this, the more you find out that the yogis were into something all along. An Ayurvedic concept like the chakras, for example, I kind of thought of it as New Age woo-woo for a long time. But actually the idea is very ancient, and it turns out that every one of those locations has an endocrine gland, and every one of those locations has a major nerve plexus. So the ancient yogis intuited that these were indeed energy centers of sorts, which has been borne out by science now. And it was Hippocrates, of all people, the father of modern Western medicine. He said that all disease begins in the gut. So the reason I brought Ayurveda into this is because we all think that we're of rational mind, that we make rational decisions about everything we do. So right away, when we start talking about the microbiome, we start talking about how much it affects the way we think. And if you read the second line here, due to the interconnectedness of our brain and the enteric nervous system, which is this huge lattice work of nerves associated with the gut and the intestines, via the vagus nerve, which connects all that to the brain. Once our gut bacteria are out of whack, we are vulnerable to a pattern of emotional discomfort and increasing episodes of anxiety and depression. So what this is saying is that the status of what's going on in your belly affects how you think. They've done a number of studies along these lines. I watched this great show the other night. I think it was called Hacking Your Brain. It was Nova. I have the app for PBS app on my Roku box, so I was rewatching it. And they were really talking about how susceptible we are to what they call fast thinking, reaction thinking. That most of the things and the thoughts that we have in life are reactive that we aren't really thinking before we do a lot of things. They did a study with judges and found out that they gave harsher sentences when they were closer to dinner time and there was less blood sugar in their bloodstreams. So judges, we like to hope, think that they're of rational mind when they're handing out sentences. Apparently they're not always as rational. And another study showed that most people think they're much better drivers than they actually are. So the reason this comes into today's discussion is because one of the ways that you can come back and be in tune with making good decisions in your life is by doing a practice of daily mindfulness, meditation, slow things down. So the TV show the other night that I was just talking about, Hacking Your Brain, talked about slow thinking. So how to slow your system down so that you actually are, in fact, making rational decisions, choosing the path of your life. It affects you on a lot of levels. You see here it says 95% of the body's serotonin supply is found in the bowels. And serotonin is associated with relaxation, calmness in your system. So when that's interfered with, then that natural ability of your body to create calmness is diminished. And in fact, stress hormones are increased. But meditation, we've proven scientifically, also normalizes the stress hormones like cortisol and these things in your bloodstream. So there's a lot of things that happen when you meditate besides just calming the mind. One of the things that Nakamura Sensei brought back and was talking about is the Yoga Sutras. These were compiled, what they call it, compiling rather than written, by a gentleman named Patanjali. And the dates aren't exactly clear. Again, it depends on who you ask. But somewhere between 1,800 years ago and 2,300 years ago, this was compiled. And it was basically a collection of thoughts that already existed in the Vedic scriptures and assembled into something which became known as classical yoga or Raja Yoga, Raja meaning royal yoga, which is, again, about meditation. So it's interesting to note the first word here of the Yoga Sutras, there's 196 of these passages. Sutras, by the way, means threads of knowledge, and it is actually the root word for sutures. So threads of knowledge. The very first word, Atta Yoga Anushasanam, now begins the teaching or experience of yoga now. So before anything can happen in terms of spiritual development, of unveiling your true self, you have to come into the present. Atta, and it's deliberately the first word. Every word in this whole thing is chosen very carefully. Notice what the second one says. It defines yoga. Yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. So I'm going to skip ahead one panel here. So many of you have seen this diagram recently in our Thursday meetings. Third order thinking are the fluctuations of the mind that call the vrittis, yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So our goal is to calm those. So when you come into the present and you calm the fluctuations of the mind, then you will reside in your own true nature. This is how you find your true self, by calming the mind, coming into the present. But number 4 here is, if you don't do that, then you will identify with your thoughts. Then we go back to the idea that I was talking about earlier, how you're governed by your emotions, your beliefs, all of the things that program your ego and your identity. So the way we get past that is that we go beneath it by doing meditation practice. So most of us live in the state that's the picture on the left. What we're striving for is to be the picture on the right. I think it's interesting that they show the dog doing it, but it's difficult for us humans to find that state. I used to really enjoy taking hikes with my dog through the woods. And just watching the dog smell and breathe, and you see it, and it just reminded me to be present and enjoy all the things going on in the woods. So we can learn a lot from our animal friends. The Yoga Sutras does not say a whole lot about physical yoga, but it does say these three things. Physical postures should be steady and relaxed. And when you break that down to what that really means, it sounds a lot like our 4 rules. If you're following the 4 rules, relax deeply, weight, underside, all of those things, then you're doing the kinds of things, the physical state that you should be in when doing yoga postures. So the same thing for doing Aikido practice. Perfection in posture is achieved when all effort to perform it becomes effortless and attention merges with the infinite. So if that doesn't sound like extending ki, I don't know what does. And also relaxing deeply when all effort to perform it becomes effortless. So I like to use the word dynamic relaxation when I say it. So you're using only the muscles you need to accomplish the task and not adding anything. And the final thing that it says on the subject is, from then on, the practitioner is undisturbed by dualities. Which means basically you're no longer thinking of yourself as separate from the universe. You're joined in harmony with the universe. The mind and body are unified, so the dualities go away when we practice these principles. So the Ashtanga, the 8 limbs of yoga, is another principle that Nakamura Sensei brought back and talked about according to this article that I read. It's divided into 2 categories, the external and the internal practices. We'll talk about in more detail in a second, the Yamas and Niyamas, the restraints and observances. So we'll jump ahead to asana, which are the physical postures, the exercises of yoga, what most people in the West think of yoga. And pranayama, which are the breathing exercises, which includes ki breathing. Asana and ki breathing go together because if you don't have the breath awareness in the physical practices of yoga, it's really not yoga, it's just calisthenics. So the internal practices pratyahara. That's basically what we do when you go into a deep, relaxing state, when you're ki breathing or doing yoga meditation or expansion, contraction meditation. You go to that place of pratyahara. And it's usually described as the withdrawal of the senses, but I've been saying for a while that it's kind of withdrawal into the senses, and I heard another teacher use that description too. Use the senses, focusing on the senses to get out of your head. What do I feel physically as I meditate? I feel the sensation of the breath in my throat. I feel my belly expanding and contracting. These kinds of things, which focus awareness on the experience you're having rather than thinking about the experience that you're having. It's our dharana concentration. When we focus on a single object like a mandala or a mantra or even the breath, that's kind of one-pointed meditation. Dhyana is when we take it deeper and we can just be in that pure state. There's different definitions according to different traditions, but basically it comes down to that. That dhyana is that first order when you're clear of everything and you're just pure presence, just pure awareness. And of course the ultimate goal of all of that is samadhi. That is when you've achieved the ultimate joining with the universe. And when you can stay in that place, when you see the universe and all things, and you can live with that awareness, they say that that's when you're enlightened. I'm still working on it myself. The Yamas and Niyamas, I said I would talk about that. Notice that the first one in the Yamas is ahimsa, non-harming, which of course is a primary principle in Aikido in general, in Ki-Aikido in particular. So our goal isn't to injure or defeat an opponent. Our goal is to defend, and maybe ourselves and maybe some other people, but where our goal doesn't start out as trying to injure the person that we're defending from. So non-harming is a primary goal and principle, a guiding principle for us as Ki-Aikidoists. It's also a primary guiding influence on some of the other South Asian religions. Some of them have taken it to an extreme degree where they run around with a broom and sweep in front of them so that they never step on an insect. There's a lot of people that are vegetarians because of this. They believe it should mean that you shouldn't eat animals. Satya, truthfulness. If you want to grow spiritually, you have to live in reality, live in truth. This means being true with yourself. It doesn't mean being critical of yourself. It means being able to be objective and see things as they really are so that you can move forward. If you want to have real relationships in life, you have to have a relationship based on truth. So if I told all of you that I'm best friends with Eric Clapton, and he and I and Jeff Beck, and we're all good buddies, because I want you to think of how great a musician I am, we can never have a real relationship because none of that is true, even though I would like it to be true. But I can never have a real relationship if I start out by exaggerating who I am or misrepresenting who I am, because I always have to carry the weight of that untruth in our relationship. So truthfulness for a lot of reasons if you want to grow spiritually. Obviously, asteya, non-stealing, that goes back to ahimsa, the first one, non-harming. If you're stealing somebody's stuff, you're harming that person. But also, if you're focused on trying to achieve happiness in life by taking other people's stuff, you're not going to be able to grow spiritually. Brahmacharya is interesting. A lot of people cringe because it's often translated as, the commandment. You notice a lot of these relate to the 10 Commandments. But the purpose is different. It's not because you're going to go to hell if you do these things. It's because you won't grow spiritually. And so this one is, thou shalt not commit adultery, brahmacharya. So that's why it says chastity there. But from a practical consideration, what it really means is that you don't want to be in relationships that take you away from your spiritual growth. You want to be in relationships that support your spiritual growth. You want to focus on developing your own spirituality, which you can then bring into a relationship and have a healthy relationship with another person. Instead of looking for that meaning in having short-term relationships with other people, we'll put it that way. Aparigrotha is non-greed. So obviously greed is going to get in the way if you're focused on your possessions, focus on clinging your possessions like Gollum in The Lord of the Rings. Mine, mine, mine. And, I admit that I like having the stuff that's in my life, and it's a lot easier, and I worked hard to get it. And I would miss it if it was gone. But if our whole identity is associated with these kinds of things, then we're not going to be able to grow spiritually. When we talk about the niyamas, the observances, cleanliness, of course we're talking about the body, taking baths and taking care of your health. But we're also talking about the kinds of things that you put into your mind. I've heard Shainer Sensei mention on a number of occasions that he won't watch horror movies because he doesn't want to put that stuff in his head. And I feel the same way. I haven't watched a horror movie in 30 or 40 years, maybe longer, I think, since The Exorcist or something, because I really just don't want to put that stuff in my head. So cleanliness on a lot of levels, and choosing what you expose yourself to, choosing what you put in. Santosha, contentment. You could also say gratitude. I'm thankful for all the good things that we do have, that we're all here together sharing this knowledge today, that we're all healthy enough and well off enough that we can take this time off to do these kinds of things. There's so many things that we can be thankful for if we just stop and take a look. Tapas, discipline. So obviously this means doing the practice and doing it on a regular basis. But it also means something else. One of my teachers, Yoganand Michael Carroll, who is the dean at Kripalu, at the Kripalu Yoga Institute, and I did his 7-year advanced teacher training program at one point. And he talks about little observances that we can do for ourselves. For example, I truly enjoy a nice glass of scotch on the rocks now and then. So I'm watching a TV show and I see somebody pouring some scotch over the rocks, and I go, wow, that looks really good. And I know I have some on the shelf in the kitchen. Why don't I go have some? So what Yoganand says is to be self-aware that 30 seconds ago you weren't even thinking about that chocolate or scotch or whatever it is. That you can choose in that moment to recognize that you had the thought put in there, it wasn't your own thought, and that you were basically allowing yourself to be manipulated by events, so that you can choose as a little observance, as a little discipline, to not do that. And later on, if you want to have that piece of chocolate, you can sit and enjoy it and actually taste it. So in the old days, if somebody gave me some chocolate and I brought it home, it'd be gone in a day or two. But now, there's a box of chocolates that I got for Christmas, and I still have most of it. I've eaten a couple. But when I decide to eat it, I'm going to taste it and really enjoy it. And not because I saw somebody on TV eating chocolate. So you can do those little things for yourself to help strengthen your resolve to make better decisions in all areas of your life. Svadhyaya is self-study. So again, learning to be more self-observant. They also say study of the scriptures. So that might be reading Tohei Sensei's books. It might be reading the Vedic scriptures. It might be reading the Upanishads, which is what they're talking about here traditionally. But anything that leads to personal growth, self-study, and making a habit of it. Ishvari Pranidhana, devotion towards universal consciousness. So that's devotion towards higher power, devotion towards the reality that we are an aspect of the power of creation itself, of the idea of becoming unified with the universe itself. So it means different things to different people. Yoga doesn't really tell you what religion to belong to. There was an exhibit at the Smithsonian some years ago, about 8 years ago, on yoga, and there were a lot of pictures of Islamic and Muslim yogis. Believe it or not, if you go back far enough, when the Persians invaded the north of India. So it's not about a specific religion. It's about having tools to enhance whatever your personal beliefs are. So a little bit more on Svadhyaya, self-reflection. That's how it looks in Sanskrit. The ultimate goal of Svadhyaya is living in the knowledge of our Atman, or true self. That theme keeps coming back here. I had come to learn that sometimes acknowledging and witnessing my experience is far more powerful than analyzing, trying to figure out or fix it. By simply being seen and acknowledging my old wounds had lost some of their hold on me, and I was able to walk on having shed much of their weight. This is Yoganand Michael Carroll again. Because he was my teacher, I talked about this with him at lunch one day. And again, he was saying, he was talking about how we can basically recreate events, even going back to childhood, and bring them up in our head and create the same stress and the same raging hormones and stress hormones in our bloodstream just by reliving it mentally. And that's not what we're trying to do in yoga. What we want to do instead is feel what's happening in our body now as a result of having that. Where are we holding the stress? For example, you might be holding it around your heart. So you would bring your awareness to your heart and just focus on the sensations there and sit with it and breathe with it. Focus on the reality of where you are right now in this moment, at this point in your life. Because in many cases, like things that happened between me and my father's been gone since 1970, so he's not going to be around. There's nothing to resolve there, only what I can resolve for myself. So you sit with these things and you resolve them by focusing on how they're affecting you in your life right now. And that's a really important lesson in all of this. And that's how we can move on. Svadhyaya again. self-study. Most of us will come to know ourselves by wading through life, hands dirty, eyes and hearts open, observing all that we would prefer to turn away from. So pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses or withdrawal into the senses. So most of you have heard of B.K.S. Iyengar, who was one of the primary teachers who brought Hatha Yoga to the West, starting in the 1960s, early 70s. By drawing our senses of perception inward, we are able to experience the control, the silence, and quietness of the mind. So this is what we're trying to achieve when we do some of the practices that we'll be doing today, that Sensei will be sharing later on. A lot of you don't know that Ravi Shankar, the great sitar player, is also a guru and spiritual leader to millions of people actually in India. He says, withdraw your senses from the object to its source. Then union happens. Then yoga happens. So remember the definition of yoga from earlier. And so this leads us to our own teacher, Koichi Tohei Sensei. Human beings are blessed with a mind that is directly connected to the mind of the universe. Notice there's a common theme here through all of this. So one of the last things I wanted to talk about before we start doing some practice is Sankalpa. When we break the word into its components, San means heartfelt desire, and Kalpa is the commitment to intention. And ultimately, that's the thing that brings you into harmony. And of course, we know that that means in harmony with yourself as a manifestation of the universe. As children, many of us were taught to say our prayers before going to sleep at night. We now know that during sleep, the subconscious mind processes and integrates what we learn and experience during the day. Your bedtime affirmations or prayer are the last things your mind sees before sleep, making them readily accessible to the fertile ground of the subconscious. So there was a lot of wisdom in being taught to say our prayers. So Tempu Nakamura Sensei, as I discovered reading about him, also taught the idea of reprogramming the mind right before sleep. He taught a number of techniques, saying your affirmations to yourself while looking at yourself in the mirror. But this idea of putting the ideas, putting your affirmations in your mind and reaffirming them right before you go to sleep is something that he taught. Sankalpa is a powerful tool to help us find our tenshoku, our life path. So I recently went back and rewatched Papali Sensei's discovery of his life's path, an interesting story. So we're all looking for our life path, but anyway, I recommend that you guys go do that, because that video is on the EKF YouTube channel. You can go back and see that. For this reason, it's important to choose your Sankalpa carefully, because you are choosing the path of your life. And you can use this tool to replace your old story with a new story. I use the word story here because ahankara, the word that you see written down here, identifying or attaching to one's ego, and that is your story. So for example, I was raised in a Republican family, and we all drove Chrysler products, and I'm a Sagittarius, and all of these things that we cling to, and we're Green Bay Packer fans. This is who we are. And we identify with all of these things without ever thinking about where they came from, without even realizing that so much of what we think of ourselves is stuff we didn't even choose for ourselves. So when you're using Sankalpa and using it to refine and define your tenshoku, your life's path, then you can become more in tune with who you really are. I had a very good friend who was a guitar player, who was also a carpenter, who one day chopped off 2 of his fingers on a saw. And he was pretty upset because he really, he did carpentry as his job, but he identified as a guitar player. That's who I am. Just like my first business card said, Steve Wolf, bass player. So if anything had happened to my hands or anything at that point, I would have been at a loss, because that was my full identity at that point in my life. So he was pretty upset, obviously, because he couldn't play anymore. And I was talking to him on the phone, and I said, well, what you're about to find out is that all your true friends will love you for who you are, whether you're a guitar player or not. And 10 years later, he came back and suddenly said, Steve, you know, that was really true. My friends really stood up and showed me that they really cared about me, and it wasn't about me being a guitar player, and it helped me find more of who I really am and feel more confident about who I am. So I thought that was pretty cool. And the interesting thing now, he's got these prosthetic devices, which has actually enabled him to play guitar again, and he does actually sound pretty good. Well, the moral of the story is, don't just identify with these stories. What we're ultimately looking for is to identify a deeper part of ourself, and that is our connection to the universe itself. Had I not created my whole world, I would certainly have died in other people's. Which pretty much says what we just were talking about. So one of the last things I want to talk about is Abhyasa, Kino Shurenho. Abhyasa is a Sanskrit word meaning practice, and refers to a practice that aims at achieving a tranquil state of mind. So Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras explains the importance of Abhyasa to achieve a yogic state of mind. Patanjali describes Abhyasa as the practice or discipline that is used to attain and remain in a state of harmony with the self. The great sage recommends 3 essentials for practicing Abhyasa: practice for a longer time, practice without interruption, and staying committed to the practice. So Soshu Koichi Tohei taught that Kino Shurenho explains how to drill, repeat, practice, and develop the habit of living with mind and body unified. So I borrowed that last quote from Sensei from an email that he sent out recently, but it ties directly into this concept of Abhyasa, maintaining a practice over an extended period of time. If you want to be a great anything, a bass player, if you want to reach the depths of understanding and your connection to the universe, all of it requires practice. So in the wise word of the Thai forest meditation master, Ajahn Chah, practice when you want to, but more importantly, practice when you don't want to. Some of you have heard the Buddhist saying, you should practice a half an hour a day, and if you don't have time to practice a half an hour a day, you should practice an hour a day. The same idea. So I'm going to end with this thought. I mentioned the exhibit at the Smithsonian. I've been teaching yoga for the county for almost 20 years here, and teach seniors classes primarily for them. And they gave me a bus, and I was able to contact a docent for this exhibit. And this is the cover plate of the exhibit. And so I was able to take a nice group down there and get a personal tour for my yoga students. But there's a problem with the name of the exhibit. It made me think, having heard some things about that from both Shaner Sensei and from Yoganand Michael Carroll, who said you cannot be transformed into that you already are. What we're seeking for is already inside of us. So I was speculating that the person who titled this exhibit wasn't actually a yogi. Marion Lebensbaum Sensei shared this quote with me the other day when we were running through some of this material. We shall walk together on this path of life, for all things are part of the universe and are connected with each other to form one whole unity. So I'm going to end this part of our discussion with this from Koichi Tohei. Let's have a universal spirit that loves and protects all creation, helps all things grow and develop. Now, all of you have heard this before. But this is really what we're talking about for real, and that's what these inner practices are about. So I'm going to stop the share. And we're going to move toward a yoga practice. Excuse me while I switch back over here. So let's go ahead and get started. And please find a comfortable seat. If you're not comfortable sitting on the ground or cross-legged like I am right now, feel free to sit in a chair or something. So a lot of these first things that we'll be doing will be just fine in a chair. One of the classes I teach for the seniors is a chair yoga class, and it works out very well. In fact, I made a whole DVD video on the subject. So please find a comfortable seat. And we'll go ahead and start to practice that idea of pratyahara, withdrawal into the senses. Allow your eyes closed. Right away when you do this, your brain waves change. You start to move towards alpha brain waves, a little bit slower brain waves. What's important is actually what you feel when you close your eyes. Maybe you begin to feel a physical change in your body simply by turning your awareness inward to what you feel right now. Taking inventory of the body as you bring it to your mat right now. What do you notice? And notice with your sensory awareness, not your intellectual awareness. One of my favorite teachers, who's also a California teacher, Eric Schiffman, says that if there's English language words going on in your head, you're not in the moment. You're in your head. So our goal as we close our eyes now and bring our awareness inside is to feel the weight of your body, where your weight is, where your sit bones and the earth touch each other. And allow your weight to settle naturally. And by that we mean the natural weight of your body, no more, no less. You're not making yourself heavy, but you're not making yourself light either. The true definition of weight underside is simply the natural weight of your body settling into your sit bones. The natural weight of your shoulders falling away from your ears. Natural weight of your arms settling in your lap. Just letting go and allow your arms to be supported in your lap. Trusting the earth to hold your weight. And just scanning your body for maybe any little pockets of tension. Maybe the low belly, the low back, all the muscles around your pelvis, so that you're opening up the bowl of your pelvis to receive the breath. They call the floor of the pelvis the second diaphragm sometimes, because even that area affects the quality of breath. These are important things to remember as we move towards key breathing later on. That really your whole body is involved in breathing well. Maybe scanning the area around your heart, relaxing the pectoral muscles, allowing your collarbones to broaden to their natural width. Even as you release the shoulder blades down your back, so your chest is opening, belly soft, the whole of your torso open to breath. And our face is very expressive of what's going on in our brain. But it works in reverse. As we relax the muscles of the face, we also still the mind, allowing a little space between the teeth, softening the muscles around your mouth, across the bridge of your nose, the ears and temples, the scalp. Really softening the muscles around your eyes, your eyelids. And eyebrow center, the whole of the forehead, but especially eyebrow center. This is one of the first places that reacts to stressful ideas. But now let that soften, all those worry lines, the corners of your brow, corners of your eyes melting away. The whole of your face opening. And allow that feeling of openness to spread through your whole body. Your whole body open. Open to receive this practice today. Open to the breath. Shifting your full awareness now to breath. Just noticing without judging, how are you breathing? Observing your body as it breathes itself. The natural movement of your belly as you breathe. And trusting enough to let go and let the body breathe. It knows how to breathe. And feel that subtle expansion of the rib cage. Contraction. And begin to have the sensation that your whole body is breathing. Because in fact your whole body is breathing, either directly through the lungs or indirectly through the bloodstream. As you sit now, you can feel this happening. You can feel that vibrancy in the soles of your feet, even in your toes, all those nerve endings, those proprioceptors in your feet. Feeling that vibrancy that is your aliveness. Feel it in the palms of your hands. There's so many nerve endings in the palms of your hands, in the fingers. So as you soften the fingers and hands even more, notice how that sense of relaxation is reflected in the whole of your body. And you feel that vibrancy, as if your fingers and hands themselves are breathing. The strength of your life force. I'm going to take it just a little deeper with the breathing now and do something called Dirga breath, which means complete breath. We usually start by teaching this. I like to do this as a warm-up to Ki breathing sometimes, just to get the tension out of my body so I can do Ki breathing better. So you start by being aware of the breath in the belly, the bowl of your pelvis. And then breathe into the middle, the solar plexus area. Then top it off, breathing up to the collarbones. But like Ki breathing, don't over full, don't over empty. Just breathe in that middle ground, that middle 80%. Breathing into the bottom, breathing into the middle, breathing into the top. And then just let it go. Finding your own breath rhythm, not mine. Just breathing in 3 parts so that you're breathing completely. Letting your body set the pace. About 3 or 4 more rounds like this. you're empty, even pausing, waiting for the breath to happen, breathing when your body calls for the breath. We often say in yoga that you can find yourself in the spaces between the breaths, as if that's an opening, a doorway. So we're going to continue with the three-part breath, but we're going to add some movement now. Bringing your fingertips to the ground beside you. As you start to inhale from the bottom, the breath comes in, and the breath leads the arms up, and all the way up as the breath rises up into your chest. Then exhale, taking up a lot of space as you exhale down. And just pausing until your body calls for the breath. When it does, breathe in and the arms rise. So the breath initiates the movement of the arms. And maybe you're doing this faster or slower than me. Find your own breath rhythm. Begin to notice the sensations in your body, just these simple movements. Notice the heat starting to come into your chest and shoulders. In some traditions, they call that Agni, stoking your inner fires, your inner energy. Bottom, middle, top, as you go. And exhaling down. Let's do one complete more round like this. Inhaling up, bottom, middle, top. Lengthen up, clasp your hands up there, and just loosen up your shoulder girdle. Breathing naturally. Don't hold your breath. And that's already generating enough heat where I really don't need this pullover anymore, so I'm going to take it off. So now just your right arm, let it inhale up, lengthen up, stretch up from your hip to your fingertips, then exhale it down. The second side, left arm, inhale up, lengthen up, get long, and then exhale down. Inhale, right arm up, bottom, middle, top, a complete breath, lengthening from your hip through the waist, through the ribs, through the shoulder to the fingers, and exhale down. The second side, inhale up, lengthening, staying grounded in your sit bone, your left sit bone. I'm mirroring you as we go. And exhale it down. We'll take it a little farther now. Inhale up. And exhale, let your bottom hand slide out. Keep that top arm behind your ear to keep the shoulder open. And then inhale up and exhale it down. Keep going, breathing in. Get long through the torso and exhale. Slide it out. And reach. Sink your sit bone into the floor, your left sit bone. Inhale up and exhale. I'm going to take it even farther now. Inhale up and exhale over, and then just let the arm fall. As the breath returns, the second arm rises. And exhale into the stretch and let the arm fall naturally. And explore the range of motion in your shoulder. One of the ailments that happens with people as they get older is frozen shoulder syndrome. So when you do these kinds of things on a regular basis, you'll avoid getting that. But I've also found that some people that have been in my classes have been able to cure that by doing these simple motions. And just keep it going. A couple more rounds just like this. Inhale up and exhale and reach. Bring it down, inhale up, exhale and reach, let the arm fall, and one more. Inhale up, exhale over, be long through the torso and down. So I'm going to go ahead and take the right hand to my left knee. And now that we've kind of warmed up for the side stretch, we'll take a little deeper version of it now. Reaching across the body, lengthen up. Get the length in your spine first. Then go ahead and exhale over and stretch. Keep your shoulders relaxed. Keep your heart open and breathe. And let's get the neck involved too. Turn your gaze and look toward that raised arm. Can you do this without bringing strain into your shoulders? And you might notice that if you lengthen on the back side, the right side of your body right now, and lengthen up out of the pelvis, then you get a little more range of motion, creating just that millimeter or two of space between the vertebrae. And then inhale it up and let it go. And just pause for a second and notice the difference between the two sides of your body, just from that one stretch. So let's balance that out. Left hand to the right knee, inhale, right arm up, inhale, and exhale, bring it over. And turn your gaze to the right, but without shrugging. Stay long through the torso. And notice how you're breathing. In the Tantric Hatha Yoga tradition, which is where all of this comes from, they use the breath kind of as a barometer, like the gauges on your dashboard, to tell you how you're doing. If your breath is strained right now, it means you're holding tension. You're fighting the posture somewhere rather than opening to receive it. So you're not practicing the four rules. You're not practicing stiram sukham asanam, steady but relaxed postures. So use the breath to tell you if you are in that place you want to be. And go ahead and inhale up. So one of the things that I'm already showing you, and I haven't mentioned it, is something called the 6 directions of the spine. And one of the things I talk about a lot in my seniors classes is getting people to, if they don't do anything else, to do the 6 directions of the spine every day. And this is so vitally important. One of the things that happens when we get older is the rib cage gets stiffer and stiffer, so it can't purge itself as well, which is why a lot of older people die of pneumonia and other lung ailments. So it's really important to keep the lungs and the chest open. And you can feel already just from these side stretches that we've been doing how it's really opened up your chest. The other thing is that when you're tight and holding tension in your chest, it takes a lot of energy to breathe and get the oxygen you need just to get through daily life. So if you can open things up so that you're breathing more freely and naturally, you waste a lot less energy just trying to breathe, so you have that energy to do the good things in life. So the 6 directions of the spine are, this is 2 directions right here. Another 2 directions are just back and forth. So if we inhale forward, I'm kind of sinking my spine into the body behind my heart. It's a little bit of a back bend. Then exhale, going back into cat. So if I turn sideways, you can kind of see it more. Inhale forward, shoulder blades down your back, and exhale back. And just kind of flow back and forth, following, again, your own breath rhythm. And exhale. So think of it as this extending ki. As you breathe in, your body follows the breath, opening forward. As you exhale, you open back, open between the shoulder blades, especially focusing on the rib cage spine. And just flow back and forth. Some traditions like Kundalini Yoga will get going pretty fast here. Right now, we just want to focus on the stretching and opening. If you want to speed it up a little bit, that's okay. Right now, it feels like that's what my body wants to do. I'm going just a little faster. Let's do one more round. This time come back to neutral spine. So that's the second 2 directions of the spine. And the third 2 directions is twisting. So when we twist, there's all kinds of different ones we can do. Inhale up. And let's rotate your heart to the right. Drag your belly organs around to the right and just bring the hands down. So let's just flow a little bit before we actually hold the twist. Inhale up. Then exhale, rotate your heart and shoulders back, look back. Don't forget your neck is part of the spine too. Inhale up. And exhale, rotate back and look back. Inhale up. And exhale. Inhale up. And exhale. And this time we'll just hold the posture. Shoulders away from your ears. You want to be sitting evenly in both sit bones. You want to drop the pubic bone down in front. Make sure that you have the natural lumbar curve of your spine. One of the things that I've learned is when passing all those ki tests, when you bring your spine into its natural alignment with its natural curves, that you'll do a much better job of passing the ki tests. Especially the lumbar curve. We tend to round the low back a lot, like when we're sitting seiza or just sitting in general. And breathe. So let's just work the neck a little bit. Hold your posture, hold yourself in the twist, drop your chin and roll up and look over the front shoulder. Can you do that without shrugging? Keeping your chest broad and open. And again, notice how you feel, notice how you're breathing. The ancient yogis in the ashrams would sit in these postures for a long time sometimes, really studying the minute details, the minutiae of what their body were doing and experiencing. So they were refining these postures to the nth degree. Let's inhale both arms up now. On exhale, rotate to the second side and look back. Shoulder blades down your back, sit tall, evenly on both sit bones. Chest broad, front and back. Once you get everything lined up, just notice how you feel again. How are you breathing? What is your breath telling you? The ancient yogis believed that the life force itself, prana, what we call ki, rode the back of the breath into the body. They believe it's our direct connection to life on earth, and we know that to be true, actually. They didn't know what oxygen was, but they understood that that energy contained the life force. Now drop your chin, roll up and look over the front shoulder. That indeed it reminds us that we are part of the cycle of all life on earth. That what we breathe was made by plants, and what we breathe out, we give back to the plants to breathe. And it's all part of a cycle that's gone on for millennia. What do you feel? And then release it slowly. Well, there's all kinds of different ways of doing these exercises. I'm going to just run you through the 6 directions and really quickly, just to show you how fast that you can do this. If you just add this to your daily regimen, and maybe even I recommend doing this before ki breathing exercise, because you'll find that your breathing will come a lot easier if you do that. So just very basic. Here's a different version of the cat-cow exercise, the front and back. So I'm going to inhale and open the chest, and exhale, bring the forearms, elbows together. Inhale and open. So I'm just timing myself. I'm looking at the clock here, so I can tell you how long this takes, how little time it actually takes. Inhale, open, and exhale. Inhale, open, and exhale. Inhale, open. Exhale, let's just open. And so that's the first 2. And the second 2 again, stretch. You can just take a basic stretch and exhale and breathe and stretch. You can turn your palm over and play with it. Rotate your heart toward the ceiling. Look up, add the neck. Anything that feels good. As long as you're present and having the experience of it, it's yoga. And then inhale up and exhale down. Inhale up, second arm. And exhale over, and again, turn your palm over, play with it. Allow this opposite sit bone to settle back into the ground. Open your chest, open your heart. Breathe into it. And then go ahead and inhale up and exhale down. So that's the second two directions. And then lastly, even just basic things like this. Inhale and opening your heart. Exhale, and I'm going to grab my shoulder and look back and rotate back. Inhale, open your heart. And exhale, look back. Just kind of flow back and forth. So watching the clock now, we've only been doing this about a minute and a half. What I'm saying is that in 2 minutes, you can change how you feel. And I really like to do this, like I said, before I do Ki breathing. It really helps me get some of the tension out of the body so I can get better results with my Ki breathing. So that's 6 directions of the spine, highly recommended. So I want to show you something a little bit more ambitious. This is called a kneeling sun salute. It's not a full sun salute. And I want to show you this because I use a lot of Ki principles in how I actually teach this. My yoga students don't know that they're getting Ki principles, except for the ones who are actually doing Aikido too. A few members of the dojo are doing my virtual classes. So I'm just going to demonstrate this. So we all know that when we sit in Seiza, that we're a lot stronger for the Ki test if we're not slumping, because your spine is, interestingly enough, a lot stronger when you're in its natural alignment, when it's in the position that it was meant to be in the first place. Who knew? So I find even just rounding the back just this little bit like this for this Ki test, and you're going to have trouble doing it. And if you just drop the pubic bone down in front and bring back this lumbar curve, it makes a huge difference. But when we bow from here and begin class, of course, we move from center. And what you see a lot with beginners is they come forward and then they push off the ground to come back up. And really, it should all come from the hips. So it's not about the hips. It all happens from one point, from center. So, by the way, this is a pose in yoga called Vajrasana, which means thunderbolt pose. And all those same principles are true if you're doing it well. So if we're doing this thing called a kneeling sun salute, you'll see some of these principles about how when we bow, the one point brings the hands to the ground and the one point brings the hands back to the body. So I'm going to use that same principle here in this kneeling sun salute as we inhale up, and you can just watch this first round. And when I exhale, I use my center to take the hands out. I'm not really putting a lot of weight in the hands. And then when I come back to the cat pose, I'm using my hips to draw the hands back under me. I'm using my hips to take me back into the downward facing dog. When you first do this today, you don't have to straighten your legs. Let the hamstrings stretch out a little bit. We were sitting for quite a while. And then again, I let the hips bring my knees back and let my chest round and back for the cat. And again, my hips take the hands out. And to come out of this back to the kneeling mountain pose, notice that my hips bring the hands back to the body, just like coming out of bowing. And exhale. So if I do the whole thing as a flow, you can just watch one more. Inhale and exhale from one point, sliding out. And then inhale, one point brings the hands back under the shoulders. We exhale the hips and the one point takes the hips back. The weight goes back to the feet so you're not straining your wrists and hands. Then we inhale back to the cat. And again, one point takes the hands out to the exhale. And then we inhale back. So this, if you feel comfortable doing this, please do and join me. But if you don't want to do this, that's fine too. So anything that feels uncomfortable or painful is not yoga. So please don't do it if there's a reason why your body doesn't want to do this. So we start right here in kneeling mountain pose. Let's do this together. Inhaling. And then exhale. Let your center take the hands out. Let's inhale back to the cat. Exhale, the hips take it back to the downward facing dog, which is a really nice stretch after we've been sitting for a while. So then we'll inhale back to the cat. Then exhale. out to this pose, which I originally learned as mecha pose for obvious reasons. And let the hips draw the hands back to the body. And then up as you inhale and exhale back to your heart. So let's make it a little vinyasa, which means a flow. Let's inhale. And exhale. And inhale. And exhale. And inhale. And exhale. Inhale. And exhale, hands back to the heart. I'm going to go through one more time. I'm going to slow it down just a little bit. Inhale up. Exhale, mecha pose. Inhale to cat. Exhale, downward facing dog. Inhale, cat pose. Exhale, mecha. Inhale, kneeling mountain pose. And exhale, back to your heart. So if you don't want to do a big involved yoga practice, you want to do a little bit of warm-up that's got some stretch and a little bit of strengthening, upper body strengthening in it, that's a handy-dandy little routine that you can do, which I learned from Lilius Folan, who had the TV show when we were all kids, and is really one of the main people responsible for yoga being spread. One of the things that I want to talk about is how we do the warm-up exercises. Because a lot of times when I see people doing these, I cringe because I know that what people are doing is wrecking their back. So let's talk about the yoga idea behind some of these stretches. A lot of these stretches are in what is called Japanese yoga, and Nakamura Sensei is considered to be the founder of that. And he was teaching some of these things. But let's look at these stretches from the modern yoga perspective. When we sit and do that first stretch that we always do, what I see people doing a lot because their hamstrings are tight is they make up for it because they think the goal is to touch your feet. So what they do is they round the low back to get the hands to the feet. And especially if you're doing it ballistically, most people aren't doing ballistic stretches anymore, which I'm happy to say. Everyone was when I first started doing Aikido. And probably a lot of people ended up with back problems because of it. But what we want to do is we want to bend at the hip crease right here, not in the lower back. And if that means you don't touch your feet, that's fine. Another thing is if you want to focus the stretch in your hamstrings and not in your low back, you want to have the heels out and toes back. So as soon as you point your toes out this way and you start to go, if you even do it right now gently and start to reach, notice you feel almost all the stretch right here in your low back. And if you just change your feet and extend out through the heel with the toes back and the feet parallel, you'll notice as you start to go that you start to feel the stretch in the hamstrings, which is where you want to feel it. And if you do it that way, you'll stretch out the hamstrings and not ruin your back over time. And one more little detail I'll put in here, as we tend to favor the outside of the feet, rotating the toes, little toe side outward. So actually reach out through the inner arches so you get some stretch through the groin side of your legs as well. So if we inhale up from here and drop the pubic bone down, rotate the floor of the pelvis behind you, and just let the hands come down wherever they come down. That's the stretch. If you want to add a little movement, you can just kind of inhale, but you don't want to bang against the muscles. Inhale and exhale. You definitely don't want to do the ballistic. And one of the things in yoga is we usually do these kinds of stretches. This is called Paschimottanasana, which means west side stretch. And the back of the body is traditionally considered the west side. We tend to do these at the end of yoga practice when we're all warmed up because you can get a lot deeper stretch. So it's especially important to us that we do these in a way that doesn't injure your body when it's cold, when we do them at the beginning of class. You just want to loosen the body, relax the muscles, and breathe with it for a moment. and then come out. So there's a couple versions that we do with this wide leg position. And I see all kinds of variations of this in Aikido class. You see people doing this kind of thing, and they're really not stretching much. They're just waving their arm around. And then you see people doing this. And these are actually two different stretches in yoga. So there's a basic stretch where we rotate the navel toward the foot. The foot is straight up and down. And we come straight out here. And that's one stretch, not to be confused with another stretch where you're actually taking your foot on the inside, coming up over the top and reaching here. So I see people doing variations and a lot of things in between. So you have to think about what you're trying to do in this stretch. There's another aspect of this too. If we go from the one point, I said drop the pubic bone down in front, you'll find that it's much more stable throughout the pose when you do it. So this is one stretch. If you want to do it with the count, doesn't matter whether you can hold your foot or not, but I'm rotating and squaring my hips with the leg. If you want to do a side stretch, that's a different stretch. You can do that here, rotating your heart toward the ceiling. But just recognize that those are actually two different stretches. And I've seen many, many variations in Aikido class. Now let's do the other side if you haven't already. So again, rotate your navel. And don't be surprised when you slow down and really take a look at these things. If you notice that you're a lot more flexible on one side of the body than the other, that's true for most people. Now this is my less flexible side. What yoga would tell you, if you're trying to achieve balance, some people say the word hatha yoga means balance, means sun and moon. Bringing your body back to balance would mean on this side, which is my stiffer side, I would actually stay longer if I was doing my own practice in an effort to balance out the body. And if you wanted to try a little of this, you can go ahead and do a little bit of that stretch. Maybe some of you did that before. And so we go forward from here with the wide legs. And again, have that idea of rotating the floor of the pelvis behind you as you go. So not rounding your back. I like to do this holding the toes. Traditionally in Aikido class, we don't do that. In yoga, we do it a lot. Holding here. So again, drop the pubic bone down in front. What happens when you drop one point down and behind you is it makes your heels heavy. So if you're doing it as a ki test, you'll find it a lot harder to lift somebody's foot here if they're doing it from one point than if they're not. So again, another illustration how using the principles makes you stronger, because really you're emphasizing the strengths of the way your body is made. It's just about using your natural strengths. The principles that Tohei Sensei teaches are just natural principles. And as you've heard it said many times, they apply to just about everything. You can apply it to whatever you do in life. This is just a place to practice them and get in the habit of doing them. So then we always do it with our feet together. So a nice trick that I learned from this really famous yoga teacher named Doug Keller, who happens to live in the DC area. We're lucky that way. We have some great teachers around here. When we come in to sit like this to get ready to do the stretch, is you bring your feet in, but don't try to bring them in all the way. Instead, bring them in most of the way, and then lift your hips and bring the hips up to the heels. And you'll find that you can get in there a little more easily. Also, what we do in yoga class a lot, because so many people round their back because we're so tight in here, is we have people sit on a blanket. Because what happens is people go in here, and then they're like this, rounding the back right off the bat. So if you find yourself doing that, and you want to do these at home, I recommend sitting on a blanket, just adding that extra couple of inches. So again, I'm going to bring my feet together, bring my hips up toward the feet. And I'm just going to cradle the feet. A lot of people hold the feet together like this, but you want to let the feet fall open like a hot dog bun. Just let it open up, because otherwise you won't be able to release the inner thighs. So we do this little bounce movement here. You just want to do that very subtly if you're doing it at all, just loosening up the muscles, but definitely not banging. You don't want a groin pull. It takes a really long time to heal, which is also a reason why you want to do these stretches, because this will help prevent having groin pulls if you happen to slip on the ice or something. So from here, we take a deep breath. In yoga, we just exhale the pubic bone down in front and bring the chest out over the feet. Again, keeping the low back flat. So you might be able to fool some people by making it look real deep by rounding your back and bringing your face down toward your feet. But all you're actually doing is potentially injuring your back. It might not happen overnight, but over time it can accumulate, gently, slowly tearing those tissues in the lumbar region. So eventually a little bit of that disc material bulges out and presses against the sciatic nerve, which can cause a lot of pain and suffering. 80% of all Americans have similar problems, low back issues in their life. That's the statistic. So then come on up. And what we've done in our dojo for quite a while is, right after doing all of those, is to just do these basic knee drops, which are, it's a handy dandy twist. You can use this as one of the twists in your 6 direction practice if you want to add that. So notice my feet are nice and wide so I can get both knees on the floor. And if you want to get fancy, you can inhale and reach up through the arm. And just really loosen your low back after doing those stretches. So what we would say in yoga class is that after doing all those forward bends, we would always do a counter pose, which is some kind of a back bend, which makes sense. What we do in Aikido class then is we start rolling, which is nice in a way because it does massage your back after doing all that stretching. So anyway, keep that in mind when you're doing your warm-ups for Aikido class. And I hope you guys are still keeping up your staying limber until the day that we can all get back on the mat. So it's a good idea if you can throw those in. Again, I'm sort of preaching that you should do some of this stuff every day, and that it doesn't take a lot of time. You have time. You've got 5 minutes. You can do a lot to make your body feel better in 5 minutes. So I'm going to show you another really cool routine. This is from a teacher that I've done some training and recently took his certification in yoga for healthy aging. So we do this one lying on the back, which is always a popular choice. And it's also a little flow, kind of like the kneeling sun salute we just played with. So it starts off like this with the hands beside you. Inhale, both arms up. I'm going to exhale the right knee into my chest, just hug the knee, and just let it settle. And then I'm going to let the palm, I'm going to keep my right fingers hooked over the shin, and just let it fall open to the side. Take the other arm out to the side. And just let it open. Again, stretching the groin a little more now. Then I'm going to pass it over, hook my fingers over the top of the shin, roll my pelvis for a knee down twist is what we call this. And then rolling onto your back, stand up through the heel, reach up through the inner arch so you're stretching the whole of the leg. Getting a nice hamstring stretch. And on exhale, just bring the knee back to the chest. And then we return to where we start. Inhale the arms up. Exhale the second knee in. Let's open up into that stretch, this time on the left side of your body, hooking your fingers from underneath. So I'm just adding the weight of my arm to increase the stretch a little bit. This is also a great routine to use to warm up for Aikido practice. Let's pass it over. I'll show you how we can do it a little faster as a warm-up in a second once you learn the moves. And then rolling onto your back, reach your foot up, reach up through the arch, point the toes towards your face. And a nice hamstring stretch. Take a couple of breaths. And then exhale the knee into the chest. Just snuggle it in, open up the hip socket. I once heard it described as lubrication, jiffy lube for the joints. This is how you spread the synovial fluid around in the joints and maintain that youthful cartilage in your joints. Inhale up, stretch the leg out. So now let's do it a little bit more as a flow, like you might do as a warm-up. Exhale, bring that right knee in. Inhale, open it into your right palm. On exhale, pass it over and roll a little bit. Doing the knee down twist. On inhale, roll onto your back. Reach up through the sole of your foot. Exhale the knee to your chest. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, second knee in. Inhale, open it up to the left this time. Exhale it over to your right hand. Inhale up, reach through the sole of the foot, toes point toward your face. Exhale, knee to chest. Inhale, arms up. And exhale, hug your knees. And let's go ahead and roll onto the side here. I want to do just a couple of quick standing things. So find your way up to a comfortable standing position. Come up slowly after laying down because your heart is probably a little slower now. Standing poses are actually relatively new. They really didn't do them much before maybe 20 years, 30 years before the 20th century, the end of the 19th century. A lot of these came from the yogis watching the mercenaries in India. They borrowed some of these exercises. Even the basic sun salute, which many of you probably know, came from an exercise called the burpees, jumping back and forth. We'll do a little exercise for balance. And it's interesting that some of these poses are called warrior poses, because I think they did come, this exercise, as we inhale up, it's called Warrior One. This may look very familiar to most of you. So we're going to do a little balance exercise from Warrior One, and we're going to practice using our center. So I have my back heel grounded here, unlike when we do the Ikkyo exercise, when you let the heel come off the ground back there. Also, it's a little wider stance because I want to get a little more stretch here through the hip flexor region when I'm doing this. So the 1 point practice comes in here. We inhale up. Now shift your 1 point over the front foot. Float over the front foot. Let that bring the back knee forward and just lift the knee into what we call stork pose. Now going back, this is where you really need to keep 1 point. Where you reach back and bend the front leg and float the back foot down to the ground. So let's do that a couple more times on this side. Bring your hips over the front foot. Let your hips bring the back leg forward. Float the knee up, relax the bottom of the leg right out of the knee. Now, as you bend forward, sink straight down into the standing foot, float the back foot down, and then come back to the Warrior One. Do that one more time on this side. Shift forward. Bring that knee up. Take the leg back. Keep your 1 point. Float the back foot to the ground and back up. And then relax your arms for a minute. And you see this in yoga. You see it in Tai Chi. You see it in a lot of different traditions. You see it in a lot of Aikido dojos. Arm swinging. It's a handy dandy exercise. It's also could be considered the twist portion of your 6 directions of the spine, if you wanted to do that instead of a sitting one. By the way, all these things work great. Before we go to the second side, you can do your side stretch here. So if you're doing your side stretch here and doing it standing, what I'm doing is shifting my hips first. So again, thinking one point and keeping the weight even on both feet as I do it. If you want to add a little extra stretch, you can kind of hold the platter with the bottom hand and do it that way. So when we come up, let's inhale and shift the hips to the second side and reach up and over. They call this half moon stretch, Ardha Chandrasana. Chandra, you've probably heard somebody's name, Chandra. Means moon, so Ardha Chandrasana means half moon. And we inhale up. So now we've just done 2 of the 6 directions of the spine. If you wanted to do it standing, you could do it here and do the only other 2. So we just round up this way and then this way, roll the collarbones up. So now you've done all the 6 directions of the spine standing. So it's just another way to do it. So I'm going to bring the right foot forward this time. Do the opposite foot of whatever you did before. And I'm going to bring the arms up for the warrior 1. And make a good stretch here. Root down into the outer back heel. Keep that front knee right over the ankle. And then begin to shift your center over the front foot. And float that back knee up to stork pose. And then don't just step back. Use your center and float the back foot down and back into the posture. We used to do balance poses. We're going the second time now in every class. We used to do a version of stork pose. I don't know why we don't still do it, but somehow it fell by the wayside over the years. And let's add one more. Bring your center over and the knee up and bring it down. But some of you may remember that we always did this in every class. It's just a modified stork pose. It comes from yoga. So the one we did today just brings it into a little movement. So some of you know that I'm a professional musician as well, and I had a swing dance band for a long time during the swing dance craze that was going on starting in the late 80s and through the 90s. And so we got to do a lot of those events around the Washington area, and I got to play with this dancer named Frankie Manning. And up until he was in his 90s, he was one of the original Cotton Club dancers, and he was still just amazing and a total inspiration. And one of the things they always did at the beginning of these swing dances, they had a swing dance lesson. They always talk about keeping the knee over the ankle and always having the knee point where the ankle, the knees and the toes point in the same direction at the same time. So when I'm doing this, if you do it from the front, notice that my knee is right straight. Back up a little so you can see that my knee is right over the ankle. And the same thing on this side. So not side to side, don't let it sag in. So this is just kind of a little exercise in tracking. Also, one of the things that the complaints in Aikido a lot is knee problems. So let the arms float up, and you'll find that learning how to track and also strengthen the knee is going to help your Aikido a lot. So we inhale, and then from one point, just settle straight down. Let the arms and shoulders settle, so your weight underside. Then inhale up. So you'll find that the tendency, when I teach this in yoga class all the time, I find that people end up here with the shoulders around their ears. So let everything settle again. Get used to that feeling of weight underside. This is just another way to practice it. And that knee tracks so it's right over the ankle, front to back, side to side. Inhale up and exhale. So you can just hold this for a minute and you can feel how these muscles engage. If you want a little more groin stretch, you can stretch it out a little bit, just to the point you don't want your outer heel to come off the floor. Then you've gone too far. I'm going to rotate and mirror this on the other side. So we inhale up. And then again from your hips. Notice that I'm upright. A lot of times I see the racing version of people out here like this. So you want to go straight up from one point, settle back from one point, shoulders and arms away from your ears. Natural weight underside. Inhale up and exhale. Inhale and exhale. So I'm going to end the Hatha Yoga portion with just this exercise, which is called Utkatasana. So one of the first things that we learn in Ki class is how to stand with mind and body coordinated. And what I see all the time in both Aikido classes and in yoga classes, you stand up, and this is sometimes called samastitihi, which means equal standing. As you say, okay, people take this posture, and I see this all the time, or exaggerated with the hips forward, center. And of course, as soon as you test, everybody goes right back because the weight's in the heels. So if you start and with the weight forward on your feet, and you start with the awareness of one point, then you take your arms up the full mountain pose. And then you can actually pass the Ki test with the arms up, which is part of the Ki test. We raise the arms 3 times for the test. And then if you want to do some strengthening for your knees, sit down into the balls of your feet and make like a letter Z. Utkatasana, which means powerful pose. You do some of this every day, and it'll help keep your knees so you can keep doing Aikido when you get old. Unlike me, of course. And you can decide how hard you want to work, if you want to come down. But notice you want to keep, a lot of times you'll see this, people rounding the back. So from the hips up, it's that same alignment that we do when we stand with one point. So I highly recommend it that you do that on a regular basis. So I'm going to invite you to come down onto your backs. And we're going to end with a traditional Shavasana, which is called, it's a final relaxation pose, a guided relaxation. So please go ahead and lay down. I'm going to stay sitting because I'll be guiding the meditation. And I may have to push my puppy out of the way. I think she senses that we're approaching the end of our practice today. One of the reasons that we always end a yoga class with this kind of motion, with this kind of an exercise, with a deep relaxation, is because the body heals and grows stronger during rest. Again, that idea of giving your body a chance to heal and recover, but also they find that when you add these little periods of rest at the end of study, that you retain more of what you've learned. So 2 reasons, for the body and for the mind. And so my dog agrees wholeheartedly with that. As you lay back, the more that you let go and surrender, allowing the earth to fully take up your weight, the more benefit you'll get from these exercises that we did today. Shavasana is the name of this posture. And it has that word asana or asana in it, which means it is a posture. This is still part of the practice. It's not just a little reward or the nap we do at the end of class. It is a practice in mindfulness. As you surrender back and let go, you're fully aware of the experience of being in your body. You're fully aware of the sensations. The ancient yogis say that the purpose of Hatha yoga practice, the physical practices, is to increase the flow of prana, what we call ki, in the body. And as you settle back and relax more, your sensory awareness increases. And just as we can sense Uke's intentions when we relax more, we can feel in our wrist or whatever, we can feel more. This gives us an opportunity to blend more. When we relax more in this practice, our body can begin to speak to us. We can feel everything that's going on more and more. Again, the focus is on feeling, not thinking. Feel that aliveness, that pulse in the soles of your feet. Feel it in your ankles and lower legs. Allow your knees to be open and soft. And your thighs. And all those big muscles that attach at the hips. Let them relax. And allow the full natural weight of your pelvis to settle. Notice how this opens your belly, creates the possibility for more open, natural breath. Notice how this feels. Your belly gently rising and falling with the breath. And sense all the organs inside resting in their natural places. Every breath massaging the organs in your belly, enhancing their functions. You can feel all this going on. And become aware of a sense of spaciousness around your heart. Even the space behind your heart. In yoga, sometimes we call it the cave of the heart. And notice that as you create that sense of spaciousness around the heart, that you actually do create more space for the breath, more efficient breath. Your arms and shoulders settling back. And again, tuning into the sensations in the palms and your fingers. Palms, hands, rich with sensation. And as you soften the muscles around your neck, feel how the weight of your head settles naturally. Allowing the whole of your face to be open and soft. your whole body open to receive prana, to receive ki, healing energy, like a giant satellite dish, bathed in the life force itself. Now, in your mind's eye, from this place of complete relaxation, acknowledge the reality that every time you come to your yoga mat, your meditation cushion, that you change, that you create a new paradigm, more relaxed, more resilient, more grounded, more joyful, more open to new possibilities. A new paradigm. This is who you are. Every time you do these practices, one drop at a time, we move toward the reality of our true selves. The reality that the mind and body and spirit were originally one. So please come back to the breath. In your mind's eye, picture the possibility of movement. When it feels right, just add some small movements in the fingertips and the toes, the wrists and ankles. Just adding some gentle stretching, whatever your body needs. As you begin the transition, maybe reaching your arms over your head, reaching through the fingers and toes. And then maybe hugging your knees to your chest, and rocking a little bit side to side, hugging your knees, just using your body weight to massage your low back. You get a lot of stretching work around that area. So use your body weight now to just massage this area. And go ahead and ease over onto your right side, but either side is fine. Traditionally, it's the right side. And just pause here for a breath. And slowly push your way up to a comfortable seat. And as you arrive at your comfortable seat, have your eyes closed. Which, by the way, the name of this posture in Sanskrit, Sukhasana, does mean comfortable seat or easy seated pose. It's meant to be a relaxing, open pose that's not a distraction, so we can use it to sit in meditation. Because anytime you're uncomfortable, and meditation stops. So it's always important as we sit down for meditation or breathing that we find a comfortable position, or else all we'll be thinking about is our discomfort. I wanted to end with this nice poem. It kind of summarizes a lot of what we've been talking about today. It's called The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain all of them, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So in a traditional yoga finish, let's bring the hands to the heart. May all beings find joy in their lives. May all beings find health. May they all find inner peace in the knowledge of their true self. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. Please open your eyes and namaste, everyone. And what namaste actually means is the light in me, that part of myself, the divine, the universal in me sees that in you and honors that in you. So I think it's an appropriate ending for our practice today. And I hope all of you found something useful in what we did today. Maybe some insight into where some of these practices come from that we do in Ki-Aikido. So we're going to take a break for lunch. I'm going to leave the session going. I'm going to mute myself, but if anybody wants to visit during the lunch break, go ahead and do that. So we'll meet back at 1 o'clock, and then you'll get to meet and practice with David Shaner Sensei, doing some ki breathing and ki meditation exercises. So thank you all for joining me for this. And I'll see you in an hour, or actually about 50 minutes now. So enjoy your break. I look forward to seeing you this afternoon.
Thank you, Steve.
Oh, you're welcome.